Welcome to Trina Talk. This is the podcast where guests share their stories of pursuing their passions, living a fulfilled life, and empowering others. Each week, I talk with inspiring leaders, business owners, and people with amazing stories from around the world in unscripted conversations as they share their successes and failures. This podcast is all about empowering you to keep striving in your personal and professional life. I am your host, Trina L. Martin. Welcome, Khong, to Trina Talk. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to your amazing show.
I'm glad to have you here. We talked last week on your show, and it was amazing. And I'm so happy that we can continue this conversation and just delve right into some other things. But before we get started, tell the listeners who you are and how you come to be the Khong that you are today.
Yeah, so should we go with the professional route or the personal route in terms of explaining?
Whatever you want to do. If you want to do a blend, that's fine.
So let's start with my professional background, then we could tie into a little bit more on my personal side. So I have 10 plus years of experiences in HR and management consulting. I've worked with some of the top leadership development companies to successfully help my clients drive superb performance by developing their leaders and aligning their talent, their structure and processes. Throughout my career, I've offered creative insights and leadership solutions to tackle some of the biggest challenges that human resources face around employee engagement, strategy execution, cultural transformation, diversity and inclusion, and organizational development. I come from a family of 12 kids. My parents are Hmong, which is spelled it's Hmong. That's my background. Hmong people are an ethnic group of people from the highlands of Laos. They immigrated here as political refugees from the Vietnam War, and I was born and raised in the Midwest. And so growing up, I had to learn things quickly and at an early age, taking care of my siblings so my parents could focus on what they need to do as parents. My dad worked close to 80 hours every week to support the family. And my mom was a full-time mom at home. So I grew up very quickly, didn't really get to enjoy my childhood experience as much, but that's okay because, all of those experiences really transformed me to be the person I am today. I grew up quickly and was more mature than a lot of my peers. And so, the perspective I have in my life is that, is one that's, I would say, more mature than folks around my age. For example, I have a show that talks about purpose, and I'm in my mid 30s, and I was just interviewing a guest last week, and he was rather surprised by my passion and interest in this field of purpose and meaning. A lot of folks around my age wouldn't engage in those deep, meaningful topics. They're more engaged in their other aspects of their life, and so that's a little bit about who I am.
Wow, great. We're going to have a great conversation now. You said you're one of 12 kids. Where do you fall?
So I fall towards the middle.
Okay, so like 7, 8.
Yeah, yeah. So from the oldest to youngest, I'm like the seventh, I'd say.
Okay. Very interesting because we have similar backgrounds, and I think we talked about this on your show. I'm from the Midwest as well. I had a pretty challenging upbringing. But what I want to get into with you is you spent 10 years in HR. Now you work with diversity and inclusion and some of those big companies, helping them. And in today's day and age and everything that we have seen, throughout 2020 to now, and with you being an Asian male. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so it's for me, I believe it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Like generally speaking, when society perceive Asian people, they're usually successful, educated, and well-mannered. That's just the generalization, right? And then, of course, when you look at other ethnic, racial, or ethnic groups compared to Asian Americans in the workplace, there seems to be some disparities there. And so when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we have to define what that is for every organization and even every individual, because that's important to generate the type of work and product and in in information that will either get your clients or your customers to buy the types of things you develop. And so, for me, for example, I not only identify as an Asian American, but also someone who happens to be gay and out. And so I have these identities that that makes up who I am, in how I perceive things in my life. And so there's this notion, and I did a thesis on this during my undergrad years, of the model minority myth, which is the concept of that Asians are considered the model minority, and therefore every other racial group should copy that because they are the model. But the myth of it is that not, of course, not all Asians are you can't just generalize an entire group of people, right? Like, for example, my parents were political refugees of the Vietnam War. They grew up in a third world country, had to fled to the United States, and they spoke no English, had no understanding of what America was, didn't even know how to operate a stove or a refrigerator. And so they had to start from the ground up in a world that they didn't know exist. And so growing up, English wasn't my first language. I didn't, like I wasn't born to learn how to speak English. Like I learned that in school. And, and then of course going to school, going to obtain my higher ed degrees, I had to navigate all of those complexities of education and the systems within it and the processes and connect with the right people to essentially in order to pursue my education and graduate. So, I would be considered as the first generation of my family to go to college. That's the term that would be used for folks, of my background. And so it's a challenge. And, so you factor a portion of, an ethnic group within the Asian population, like it then challenges this notion that, well, our Asian Americans really are the model, I mean, because everyone's so different. I mean, of course, I believe in working hard. I believe in excellence, doing the best I can in my work with what God or the Creator has given me, my abilities and talents to do the best work that I can. And so, I think everyone should, but we shouldn't lump an entire group of a racial group together and say, this is what they look like, and this is what they do, this is how they behave, so therefore everyone now should copy that. And I believe that it's, quite frankly, a concept that was developed by white supremacy. I mean, in order to create this racial hierarchy, you have to have a model to look up to. So white people are on the top, Asians are in the below, and then of course XYZ, right? And so it's of course damaging to everyone, really, because if, for example, if I were an Asian American and sorry, if I had a friend who's African American and he perceives me as Asian American who is very well established in his career in life, and he has this perception that all Black people, all Native Americans, all Latinos should behave and look and be, in that way the Asian Americans are, then it's going to create some racial tension, of course, between groups. And that's what the institutional, that's what white supremacy, that's how they operate. It is to generate animosity between racial groups. So that way, white people can remain being at the top. And so there's a lot of research out there that talks about the model minority myth that I would encourage people to take a look at, because it is important to understand race relations as is an ongoing challenge among relationships, friendships, within organizations, your coworkers. So yeah, that's it's a fascinating topic for sure.
Yeah, I can hear the passion in your voice and just how you were able to articulate and expound on that makes me really feel it. It's kind of, you're expressing some of the things that I have felt all my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, because of your passion that you have and because of what you've been through in life, is that one of the reasons why you decided to get into diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So diversity, equity, inclusion is embedded within my DNA, right? I mean, obviously I identify as an Asian American, that's pretty obvious. And the experiences that came, out of my identities have really shaped me to be the person I am today. And so, it would be a shame to say that I've never been discriminated and faced discrimination before. I have a number of times. In fact, not only have I witnessed, my parents being discriminated against when they first settled in America. I was threatened in a number of cases because of my, my look. And also in situations where people knew I was gay. And so it can be scary. And so I want to be able to engage in this work so that I can change people's hearts and minds, so that we can live in a world of peace, a world of understanding, compassion, and love towards one another.
Wow, that's beautiful, and that's what we need. We need more humanity in just totally in America, but in the world in general. And we were speaking before we went live about how you're very mature. You have interest in things and have passion for purpose and the diversity and inclusion. That some might say that maybe other people in your age group are not focused on. So it just it's just very interesting to me, your perspective, because not many people get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
My perspective is different than a white woman's perspective. Let's just say
Mm-hmm.
that. And when you try to explain these things to certain people, they go, well, oh no, that's not real. You and everyone else has the same opportunity, but you and I both know that's not so.
Mm-hmm.
They say, yeah, everybody has the same opportunity. Yeah, in quotes, that's true, but then there's things that you have and I have experienced and gone through that someone else will never go through.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're working with businesses and individuals and different clients of yours, when you're going through that process, tell me what that looks like. How, when they bring you in and you sit them down and you say, okay, you have this problem, or you ask, what is their problem? And you start to go into your process with them. Tell me what that looks like and how are they reacting? Are they receptive? Are they saying, no, everything is great here? Because at the end of the day, we all want to think that we're on the right path.
Right. So I think that it's important to come into an organization and assess their business challenges and needs and find the appropriate solutions to address those challenges. So when I meet with a client or a prospect, what I usually do is ask them a list of questions around diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Like, how do you define diversity, equity, inclusion? How does it show up in the organization? What does it look like? And what are the challenges that you're currently facing at the moment? And how does that tie into your 5-10-year business strategy plan? And so with every organization, it's different because of either the makeup of the organization or the size of the organization or the location, the geography of the location. So for example, in the Midwest, organizations are still struggling with, they get diversity, but they're still struggling with the notion of inclusion. Whereas in the West Coast, particularly in the Bay Area, organizations we get diversity, we get inclusion, we get equity. Let's talk about belonging. Belonging is like essentially the next step towards achieving a workforce that is completely and absolutely engaged. And so every organization is different, and you have to have a set of right questions to ask in order to properly diagnose, the challenges that they face. But going back to the definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion, I know that there's a broad range of, broad definition of each term, but I want to give an example so that way actually helps your listeners to conceptualize it probably easier on what each of those terms means. So diversity is how I look at it is when you're at a meeting, you've been invited to the meeting, right? And there's a makeup of folks from different backgrounds in race and gender. The inclusion part is even if you're invited to the table, the meeting, are you included in these discussions? Are you, when you're sharing your thoughts and you're questioning things during the meeting, are they perceived to be valid? Do you feel like you're being respected? So that's the inclusion part. The equity part is, it goes a step further and says, let's look at the process in which people were invited to the meeting and how they were treated during the meeting. And let's ensure that they have a space where they can actually share their thoughts and ideas without being judged because of the color of their skin or being stereotyped because of who they are. And so when you create a culture of belonging, you're really essentially creating an environment where people feel psychologically safe. There's this term of psychological safety, where you're creating an environment of psychological safety where people can actually share their ideas and opinions and feel like they're not going to get judged for it. And it's authentic, it's 100% who they are and how they feel and what they think. And of course, there'll be disagreement, but those disagreements are not based on because of the color of their skin, because they would have already, the company would have already created and implemented initiatives and programs to ensure that moments of being judged because of the color of your skin wouldn't happen in the workplace. And so, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I'm really glad you went into that because we hear that term a lot nowadays: diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hear
Mhm.
it, and I don't think a lot of people actually know what that means. I think when you bring that up, people say, oh, well, we have, Black people who work for us, we have Latinas, we have Asian people, but it's more than just checking the box saying that you hired people
Mhm.
of a certain persuasion. It's more
Yeah.
than that. And and you hit it the nail right on the head because I don't know if you've heard of Cynthia Marshall, but I heard her speak a couple years ago. She's the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban hired her. She is the first woman and she's a Black female. And in
Mhm.
her talk that I heard her give, she was talking about diversity and inclusion. And she stated it like this, similar to yours. She said, um, diversity is being invited to a party,
Mhm.
inclusion is being asked to dance.
Mhm. Yeah.
And she was a VP at AT&T for many years, and she said she would do this exercise with all of her execs in meetings, and they couldn't get it because just like you and I are talking,
Mhm.
you say diversity and inclusion, but if you have never been that person on the other side, you don't know what that means. So she said in her meetings with execs, what she would do is she would just put on music and say, okay, how many people know how to do the Cupid shuffle? So the people who knew how to do it would get up and dance, and then inevitably there's somebody who doesn't, right? So they're standing looking around and and everybody's having fun and dancing. And she goes, okay, so whoever's on the wall, people who know this dance, get somebody on the wall and teach them how to do this dance.
Mhm.
So after her few minutes of doing this, she said, okay, that's diversity and inclusion. So the people who didn't know how to do this dance while you were standing on the wall and watching everyone else have fun, how did you feel? And then, of course, they said, well, I felt left out. I didn't feel right because I was the only one that didn't know how to do it. So, exactly. So, that's how people feel when, like you said, when you're invited to a meeting, but you're disregarded, you're not listened to. Um, what you have to say is not taken as valid. And I think people, companies as a whole, I think they really need to go through a course or have someone like you to really teach them what it means because right now I think it's just the buzzword of the century, right? It's
Mhm.
diversity and inclusion. Whereas I don't know if many people are really digging in to really say, okay, let's look at our diversity and inclusion and see if it's really what it is.
Mhm. Right. And the thing is that people are intimidated by this work because this work is hard and there's no single answer to an organizational challenge or challenges. And so it requires the participation of everyone within the organization, from individual contributors to executives. And so it's important that when we're doing this cultural transformation or change management, that we not only get the buy-in of the leadership team, but also that the mid-level leaders, like and the managers, for example, are behaving in ways that could really change the culture, because they're essentially at the end of the day are mimicking what the executives are desiring, what needs to be changed, and these managers manage their teams. And so it's important that when it comes to behavior change and sustainability, that not only are we checking the box by providing 1-2 day unconscious bias training for everyone, or that when every new hire is hired on, that they go through this unconscious bias training, but that there's a follow-up discussion with their managers, and that there's concrete steps that should be taken, um, you know 3 to 6 months to a year, so that the work continues and sustains. And so, you know, 5-10 years ago, when I was engaged in this work, it was essentially a part-time job in addition to my full-time job. So what I mean by that is I would be hired as a full-time employee, focusing on HR related matters. But then, the leadership team will pull me in and say, well, could we have you, focus on this other aspect of our organization, but we won't compensate you for it. We want you to do it. So, but now I'm seeing the organization begin to change that. It's no longer a volunteer thing, right? And volunteer in a way, meaning that you're contributing, additional time in work that's, out of scope of your responsibilities. Now they're actually, leaders of organizations are now taking more accountability and action by delegating budgets to hire their chief diversity officer, to, you know, allocate some budget for employee resource groups or affinity groups doing these types of work. Employee resource groups, for example, leaders who lead those groups, not only are they leading them and managing their organization, they're also doing the daytime, full-time job. And so in the past, the traditional route has always been, well, you're nominated or selected to serve as an ERG leader. But then, organizations will not compensate for you. And so it's in a way, it's lacking, the equity piece, right? Like when we talk about equity and what does that mean? In order to retain top talent and people who are very compassionate about, people who have passion in this work and are the most engaged employees of the organization, you have to ensure that they're happy. And part of it is that they should be compensated for extra work. And so organizations out here, especially in the Bay Area and West Coast, are beginning to realize just how important this work is, and that if they were to be the next Google or Facebook or Airbnb or one of the most innovative companies, that they have to retain a pool of diverse talent, because research has indicated that organizations that have inclusive teams and diverse teams will outperform their competitors. And diversity in thought and in leadership and experiences and background definitely contributes to the creativity of work. And so, that leads to innovation, which leads to higher profit margins for organizations. And so one of the organizations, some organizations I've worked with, they understand the research is there, that it's important and it's valid. But again, they're faced with the dilemma of how do I change my behavior or get to understand this fully, so that way my business can survive. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it has to do with internal workings. Like we have to evaluate our own unconscious bias, because everyone has biases. And so you have to do the internal work of assessing your biases and how that impacts, your day-to-day work and in the business, and how you're going about recruiting people, diverse talent, and sustaining diverse talent, to ensuring that you're creating an organization that's not only inclusive, but is innovative and can be sustainable.
So good. I mean, I see why this is your passion and why companies bring you in, because it's very important and you're so knowledgeable on it. We're going to shift gears, and I want you to talk about your podcast, because I think that's something that is a part of you and that is very valuable to talk about. So talk about that and why you decide to do it, and just tell the listeners about it, because I really like it. I really like what you're doing with it.
Yeah. So my podcast is titled the Purpose Tuned Podcast, and I got this idea because off of a conversation I had with a friend who was struggling to find his passion in life and struggling with a lack of direction with his career and personal life. And so he had a very high level of depression and anxiety and stress. And I've never seen him this way, knowing him for quite some time. And so I was thinking that maybe if I could create content around purpose and meaning, that maybe perhaps I can help him find his own purpose in life. And also to those folks that are in the similar boat. And so it's really an idea that I had that stemmed from giving back to the people I know and love, in my friends and family, and to the world. I've been volunteering since when I was 14 in the communities, feeding the poor and providing clothes for the homeless people. And so the idea of giving back has always been a part of who I am. And so it gives me light, it gives me joy to be able to produce content that's relevant, that could be beneficial for people, and that can really hopefully change them for the better, so that it can lessen their anxiety, depression, stress, and really get them to engage in what purpose means to them, why do they exist. Like, everyone has a purpose. We just have to tap into it, and we have to have the right tools, the right resources, the right people, mentors to guide us through, and hopefully I'll just put a slight dent to changing the world. But if I could do just that, I'd be very happy with it.
I love that. And I love the fact that you created a podcast and your friend inspired you and you wanted to do something to inspire him.
Mhm.
So, how is your friend? How, once you got this off the ground and rolling, what did he think about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So he loves it. I mean, he follows every episode that I produce, and every once in a while he'll send me a text message saying, "Hey, I like this idea. What do you think of that idea?" Or, so we bounce back and have a genuine conversation about what life means to us, to each of us. And so, he's no longer um, in that state of depression, and he's beginning to realize that of course, life, there's greater things than what he's dealing with. And so there's a lot of encouragement there for him, and capacity for him to grow as a human being, to hopefully achieve um, his own purpose. And so just to be able to see him on this path or journey to finding his own um, uh, purpose makes me very happy, because it means that I've in some way changed his life, and his perception of what he thinks about himself. And that's a good thing, I think.
Oh, yeah, no, that's great. I mean, we all want that type of friend, right? Especially when we're in those dark moments. We want someone that will relate to us and talk to us and not condemn us or judge us or tell us, oh, snap out of it, you're stupid, because it's not that easy. And when somebody's really in a dark time, they don't need you punching them while they're down. They need you to really be there for them if they need that inspiration or a shoulder to cry on. But ultimately, they need someone to tell them, okay, don't give up. There's more for you in the future, so you want to keep going. So I think that's great that you inspired your friend and that he's doing well and that he's listening and
Yeah.
he's commenting on your shows. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate act of service, and that's something that you actually got to see and reap the reward from.
Definitely. And just to step back a little too, I didn't get a chance to share what the goal of the show is, but it's really to create valuable content for my listeners, so that they can incorporate the content in their own lives to make an impact, drive meaning, and achieve fulfillment. And so if I could do that on a broad scale, I think that it would be such an opportunity to be of service to people and to this world. And when I think about purpose, I think about service. I think about giving back, and it doesn't have to be you know, donations in the form of money, but you know, it could be your time, your wisdom, your knowledge. And so there are many ways of giving back. And if everyone can do their part in giving back, I think that we would create a better world, a world where people can be purpose driven and could be, um, you know, satisfied with and content with their life. And so, you know, I think that we need more of these types of discussions in order to get people to really be in the present moment and really think about what is the meaning of my life? Like, why do I exist? Like, why did the creator created me? You know, whatever your creator is. And if you don't have one, that's fine too. But I solely believe that everyone was created and meant to be here, and they have a mission that they have to accomplish before they're gone. And so I do not want people to leave this earth without having to accomplish everything that they need to accomplish that's set forth for them, to tap into their potential and reach the highest you know, talents and abilities, and to give back to the world. Everyone has something to give back, and everyone is unique in their own way. And so we have to um, you know, inspire people to be able to get them to be in a place that's not only authentic, but that they're um, believing in themselves and that they know that they're a gift to the world.
Mm. You just make me smile. I'm just sitting here while you're talking and I'm just smiling because it's just so refreshing. It's great to hear someone who is positive and trying to be positive in the world, because we have so much negativity and so much chatter going on that some days it can look very bleak, and you wonder what's going on. You like, okay, is the world coming to the end, or what's going on here? So it's very refreshing to hear someone who has a passion for helping people find their purpose and being positive.
Mhm.
So I am going to just go into our rapid fire questions. So buckle your seatbelt. Here we go.
All right, let me just.
Yeah, strap in if you need oxygen, get your mask. Okay. So who or what motivates you?
That's a great question. I would say my mom. The reason why is because she, so she's this 4 foot, what, 8, 9 woman who can be feisty. And she, you know, she's been such an incredible mom to us 12 kids. Just imagine you have kids, right? Just
Yes.
imagine giving birth to 12 kids and having to raise them all. That's a remarkable woman. And I'm proud of her. You know, my education is dedicated to, and my commitment to my career is dedicated to her. I love her. She's amazing. And I think that, you know, everyone should have a positive relationship with their mom or dad if they have one, because even if they agree or disagree, because there's a lot of life lessons that can be learned. You know, I know people who don't get along with their parents because they want their parents to act one way or another. And so, what we need in this world is understanding and compassion. And so, my dad, for example, I'm not really close with him, but um, he, you know, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says or do, but I get it. Like, I understand why he would um, either behave or perceive certain things that he does. And I don't want to change him because, you know, he wouldn't be happy, you know, being a person that's completely different. And I wouldn't be happy either because he wouldn't be happy. And so I've learned to just have compassion, understanding, and as hard as easy as it says, it's really hard to do. But I've incorporated that into my practice in all of my relationships.
Wow. And I do have to say, your mom is an amazing woman to have 12 children to raise them. I have two, and it takes my best to do it. But what you said was beautiful, and I think speaking as a mom, that is more valuable than any gift that a child could give a mother, is to say those words that you said. So your mom has got to be very proud of you, and I think that was a beautiful thing that you said. And if you haven't told your mother, you need to tell her that.
I do. She knows that.
Good, good. Okay, what demotivates you?
What demotivates me? Wow, that's a great question. I think that it's been a rough 4 years of having Trump in the White House. I think that it's been a lot of, there were days where I wake up anxious and not knowing the future of this country, and where I lie as a gay man, and also as a person of color. Um, and so I, I don't want to get into politics, but I do not want to engage with people who are just completely toxic and negative, and does not have any sense of humanity in them or decency, because it doesn't go anywhere. The conversation is not productive. Of course, you can implement like the whole, like, Stephen Covey, like the 7 habits, right? Like, seek first understand, but how could you do that on the other aisle if they look at you as an enemy, and just because of who you are, not because as a human. They don't even look at you as a human. They look at you as just as nothing. And so it's hard. It's been really hard. So I'm very happy that we now have a president that is inclusive and accepting of differences, and loves people for their humanity, and having decency. Um, and there's a lot of great Republicans out there that have that, but Trump is a different animal. And so, and in the things that he's created out of his presidency has been, it's been such a divide for this country. And so I love America, and I love my fellow Americans, and I want to be able to create, um, hopefully a world, or at least contribute to a world where we can have more compassion and understanding and listening. Um, so, yeah.
Okay. When was a time that something was said or done to hurt you, but it worked for your good?
Oh, that's a great question. Like, I feel like I'm being interviewed here for a job or something. So, what? To repeat the question one more time. So, what was? Explain a time when something has
Okay,
hurt
so
you.
here it is.
And yep.
When was a time that something was said or done to hurt you, but it
Mhm.
worked out for your good?
Yeah. Gee. I mean, I suppose there's a lot of situations of that, but the one that comes to my mind, I would say, um, this is we're on this topic of diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. Um, so I had applied for a position, and the hiring manager had asked me, what makes you distinctive, unique, uh, and how can you leverage those traits, to contribute to this position? And I said, well, as a person who happens to not only be, a person of color, but also gay, I think I have many experiences that have shaped me to be who I am, and I think I have a unique perspective because of those identities that I can contribute to this role. And he said, what hurt me was, and to my surprise, was, Khong, you need to tone that down a bit. So what he was saying was, I don't like the fact that you're gay. I don't like the fact that you're an Asian American or person of color, and I want you to tone it down because um, I don't want to tolerate that. And so, so of course I report him to the HR, and we got him in, and talked about his comment, and train him in understanding how that hurts, and also providing him with some leadership coaching so that it doesn't happen again. And so that, he was, a a leader within the organization. He is pretty high up there. And so he has a division that he manages. And so it was, it was good to be able to say that it's not okay to be, to treat people who may look and think different in that way. And I didn't get the job, and so um, that of course explains it all, right? And so, but I did, you know, provide him with the opportunity for coaching.
Good for you. What
Mhm.
is your fear?
What is my fear? Wow, that's another great question. So I think fear is, for me, is the uncertainty. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and I don't know what lies ahead in terms of my career or the business I'm trying to launch. But at the same time, I'm not going to let fear um, hold me down. It's just, that's just part of life, right? You either focus on it or you um, deal with it. And how I deal with it is, I say, okay, I acknowledge that, fear is there, but I'm going to take the chance I'm going to, build up the courage to take the risk anyway, out of fear, because that's what, great leaders have done. That's what great entrepreneurs have done. People who've changed the world have walked in the face of fear. Martin Luther King Jr., for example, have done it. And unfortunately, he, risked his life for it. But there's also, other entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and so there's a lot of incredible people out there that have dealt with it. It's just, how do you handle it? That's the key.
Mhm. Okay. Is there a time when you wish you had done something that you didn't?
Hmm. I'm not exactly sure where you got these questions, but they're really
Thank
good.
you.
It's probably more difficult in my job interviews for sure. A lot of self reflection, right? um, I would say, so. My dad has always instilled the importance of education in our family, and um, I so I was in it was towards the end of my master's program, and I told him that I wouldn't be graduating, even though I knew I was going to. But I wanted just to test him out, to see how he felt about it, and just to tease him a little. And he was, I couldn't, I could remember the face he gave me. He just gave me like a face that's like, "Are you kidding me?" type of face. Like, "Are you serious? Like, I've supported you all this time, and this is what you're doing." And that made me feel so bad as a son, and just for joking around, because he knew I was studying hard. He knew, I had long nights. There was a weekend program, and I commute 6 hours, total, there and back. And I've lost my weekends, committed to my education. And you know hard how hard it was for me, the commitment that I had to make. And so, um, and I wish I could take that back, because that didn't sit well. And I still have this image that haunts me, of him, and that's not something that I want.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Is there a time that you wish you had not done something? I guess that's kind of cumbersome. We'll skip that question because I think you can answer that with this one. What is your definition of success?
That's a great question. So my definition of success is achieving, not just your financial goals, but your personal goals and your relationship goals, um, and your life goals. Um, and to be able to maximize my fullest potential, abilities and talents, and having no regrets. I know a lot of people out there that have achieved financial success, but are just completely miserable because they don't either have the right relationships, they neglected their wives or their spouse, their kids, or they haven't found purpose, and they thought that maybe perhaps money could take care of it all, and that it was the answer to everything. And so we have to ensure that we have this holistic view of what success is, and it's not just about building a business in filing for an IPO and having it sustained, or achieving wealth. It's more than that. It's about the quality of our relationships with our loved ones. It's about having a purpose that guides us towards our North Star. It's about evolving as a human being and learning. I consider myself as a continuous learner, and I will learn until the day I die. And because there's just so much knowledge out there, and so the we live in an age of digital information. We can get information so quickly, and so thank God to technology. At the same time, if we're going to achieve success, we have to ensure that we're not neglecting other areas of our lives.
How do you recharge?
I recharge through exercising and meditating.
Okay.
I work out 5 times a week at the gym. I do some cardio exercises, some weightlifting, and then every morning I set 5 minutes just to meditate, to set the tone for the day, and that really helps me.
What legacy do you want to leave?
That's a great question. Um, Again, like all of these questions ties into purpose, right? Like, what is your legacy? How can you be a better human being? So, I like to leave a legacy that's bigger than myself, where when I do have kids, that they will benefit from it, and that they will say, look, this is our dad, and this is how he lived his life. Someone who is who's compassionate, kind to people, and always wants to create a better world, to be able to have inspiration for others to be their better self. I think that in the space of personal and professional development, it's important to lift each other higher, so that we can create a world where people can have whatever they want, achieve happiness and success in whichever version that is for them, and to be able to do it in a way that is equitable, that is fair, that is in a way that's respectable.
Give the listeners one motivational takeaway.
Motivation. I would say, I would tie it back to purpose. I would say, if you don't know what your purpose is, dedicate some time to it by either doing some research on the subject, or write down a purpose statement and have that have that as a guide to your life. What research finds or have found is that people who are purpose driven, who have a purpose, live longer. They have lower levels of stress and anxiety and depression, and the quality of their relationships with other people and with themselves are so much, it's better than those that don't have a purpose or a direction. So that's my advice.
So, Khong, as we wrap up, tell the listeners how they can connect with you if they want to hire you for a coach, how they can listen to your podcast, and any other things that you have going on.
Yeah, so I'm in the middle of creating a website. It's not up yet, but when I do, I'll post it on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. My first name is Khong, last name is Xiong. First name is spelled Khong. Last name is X as in X-ray, IONG. And they can find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I also, of course, have the podcast, the Purpose Tune podcast, that they can subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Radio Public, and other outlets.
Great. Well, Khong, I thank you for your time, and this just purpose-driven conversation has been great. So thank you for being on Trina Talk.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak more about my show and hopefully inspire people to not only tap into their own purpose, but also live a fulfilling and meaningful life.
Thank you for watching Trina Talk the video. I hope you were inspired and motivated. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe so that you can be notified whenever a new video comes out. If you're unable to watch the video, don't forget to go to iTunes and listen so that you can listen on the go wherever you are.